Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. Chris Boyd is a certified financial planner practitioner and senior vice president financial advisor at Wealth Enhancement Group, one of the nation's largest registered investment advisors. We call it Something More because we'd like to talk not only about those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Here he is, your fulfillment facilitator, your partner in prosperity, advising clients on Cape Cod and across the country. Here's your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
Welcome to the program, and thanks for being with us for another episode. I'm Chris Boyd. I'm here with Jeff Perry. We are the AMR team at Wealth Enhancement, and if you didn't know it, you probably are listening by way of podcast, but you're also able to watch video if you prefer. You can find that through the Wealth Enhancement YouTube channel, or you can go right to our web page at somethingmorewithchrisboyd.com and find postings each week.
And we're back on Facebook. The team AMR at Wealth Enhancement Group is back on Facebook. So if you used to follow us, you'll still be there. So check us out. It's going to take a little bit for that algorithm to get people back into the swing of naturally seeing it. So please go there and like our posts and
share as much as you can. We'd love to get the word out about the program, and your ratings and stars and following and all that does help get the word out. So appreciate that. Jeff, we wanted to talk a little bit about the signs of when it's time to retire.
Yeah.
And there might be some things to consider, as you know, our listeners probably know this, but we tend to work mostly with people who are either in or near retirement.
Right.
So this is the kind of topic that's near and dear to our experience with our clientele and the kind of things we deal with routinely in helping people navigate some of the things to be mindful about. There's a good Kiplinger article that we're going to maybe make some reference to, but where should we begin today?
I think we should start with that the decision to retire isn't just the random number that you throw out there and say, I'm going to retire at age 60, 65, 70, never, whatever people kind of come up with
It's so interesting how people decide it's time to retire.
Right.
Some people, it's I'm working toward my number, that they have the right amount of assets is in mind, which of course changes. The number changes if you retire earlier or later, or how much.
It's not the same number if you want to retire at 50 than it would have been at 65, which
right.
Believe it or not, some people don't get that, but
yeah. And so that's one thing. The other thing is sometimes people just go, I'm done. I retired.
Right.
It's like, oh, and they're like, well, do you think it'll work? That's sort of an afterthought. Well, how's this going to play out? it's going to have to work. They're going to make it work. So.
And sometimes this retirement's forced on you. That's not a pleasant thing, but
that's a good point.
Maybe some federal employees lately are getting some notices. Maybe they're in their early 60s and they're still working or whatever, and they've been thinking, oh, when am I going to retire? I don't know, but they get a notice that says your job is eliminated. Not just the federal government. I'm just using that because
this is the kind of thing that can happen from time to time.
Right? It happens.
Particularly people, workers who are in their certain age range can really find it difficult then to get back into the workforce,
especially at the salary that they were making, right?
Yeah. So it may be that they decide, okay, I guess I'm retired. Maybe they'll do some part-time work or whatever, but they may be challenged. So that's one time. Sometimes it's just this decision, or in this case, you're talking about a forced decision,
right?
But sometimes there are other things that people think about that sort of draws them into saying, oh, I think I might be ready.
Yeah, and that's the focus of our conversation today, and the focus of the Kiplinger's article, which I can throw in the show notes if people want to read the whole thing. But these are signs, right? Signs that maybe the universe is telling you. Kind of joking there, but maybe not. So
when you are or are not ready. Yeah.
Right.
Things to be thinking about.
Like maybe you're not thinking about retirement, but if these things resonate with you, maybe you should be. So The number one thing, it doesn't have anything to do with money, Chris. It has to do with emotions. You're emotionally ready. You kind of like, yeah,
Well,
I'm
I
ready.
gotta say, Jeff, I talk to people all the time who might be emotionally ready, but they may
Well,
not
it's
be
only one
financially
sign.
ready.
It's only one part of it. You can't just say, "Hey, I was listening to this podcast with these financial guys, and they said when I'm emotionally ready, I
It's
should
time,
retire."
yeah.
No, this is just one. This is just
One of
one part
many.
of it, right?
Well,
Yep.
I do think that I think sometimes people feel burnt out,
Right.
and that can be a driver for them to be thinking about, I need a change.
Yep.
And that's a valid consideration. Sometimes it's, I'm ready for a new adventure, a new opportunity. Sometimes it's uh, maybe it's health. I need something that,
Right.
less physically demanding or whatever it might be. So there can be a variety of things that can lead to that I'm ready kind of
Yeah.
mindset.
Emotions, physical, right? I mean, people are. It depends on the type of job you have. If you have a job that's difficult on your body, you're out there on a roof or you're landscaping or something that's really strenuous. Obviously, it could be a physical thing that gets you like, I just can't do this anymore every
Right,
day, right?
right. But what
Or
we're really talking about is something
mhm,
more of a psychology of,
emotional. Yep.
yeah, and the notion of what's the alternative? Like, I mean, it's, you talk about this from time to time, that notion that it's, okay, so now what? What are you actually going to do?
Yeah, that's
It's,
important.
there's a little bit of vacation sensibility. We had a client in not too long ago who had recently retired, and he was talking about that notion. It's like, yeah, I get up and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to be anywhere. And this sort of sense of freedom that comes with that is liberating, or anxiety ridden at times.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I feel like I'm supposed to be somewhere, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right?
I think when
But
people think about that, they're thinking about really short term. They may not be saying that, but they're thinking, oh, I won't have to do this. I won't have to do that. It's going to be, I'm going to go on vacation. And, it's like, that's retiring. We talk about this, but I think in this context, we should dig in a little bit. That reminds me of people saying, I'm retiring from something. I'm retiring from the stress, from maybe a toxic work culture, or maybe, whatever.
yeah,
But what are you retiring to, right?
yeah, it's a great point. And
So,
you got to think of it in both directions. There can be reasons where, you do want that retiring from mindset.
yeah.
Totally get that. On the other hand, you really want to have a sense of clarity of what you're retiring to.
Hmm.
Um, you can't just be saying, I'm going to be a couch potato all day in retirement. You got to have something you're doing, you're moving toward,
Hmm.
you're energized by, you are enthusiastic to participate in, or whatever. You need something that's going to really uh, give you purpose and energy that you're moving toward, not just saying, "Oh, I don't. At least I don't have to do that anymore."
Yeah. I think the key word there is purpose, right? And
Yeah,
it's different for different people. It's, the studies show it's different for different genders. Women are much better at retirement and shifting into making new social connections, activities. Men struggle with that a bit. So, but either way, have something that you want to do that, write it down, make a plan. I've seen some of the suggestions and stuff that I've read having to do with making a calendar, not a day by day calendar, but like maybe a week by week calendar. What would I do over the next few weeks? What would I do over the next few months? Just to give yourself a vision of what am I going to be doing? And it is an opportunity to do what you want to do. Could be a hobby, could be a
well, I
charity,
think
could be part
we've
time
talked
work.
about this with some guests as well, and there are some good episodes that we've had. If you haven't,
Dr. Landry. Yep.
Dr. Landry, you interviewed a couple of women about, I forget, the future of you or something like that,
That was
right?
it. Yep. Nan and
So,
Lisa. Yep.
yep, and the notion that, sometimes it's hard to imagine what you might do. If you have difficulty with that, sometimes it's perhaps helpful to have a helping hand in that process.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
but it's an opportunity that you don't want to squander.
That's right.
To sort of be thinking about this stage of life where you think in terms of financial freedom, that you can then say, what do I want this time to be
Hmm.
about? How am I going to make the most of that time with something that will be meaningful to me?
Yeah,
Whatever
absolutely.
that is. So, what are some of the other things that you need to think about?
Well, perfectly timed. Number two, number one is you're emotionally ready. Number two is I've saved enough. So
Yeah,
back to the thing that we say frequently.
yeah,
What's my number, right?
yeah, right. I think this is very much dependent in part on knowing two things: beginning date and ending date. Unfortunately, we don't necessarily know both of those all the time, but we don't know how long we'll live to, how long those funds will be needed for. We don't necessarily know, and as you described, exactly when we'll need to start. Sometimes people have unexpected changes in their
Hmm.
retirement plan due to a layoff or something like that. So, I think these are key ingredients. We can make some adjustments based on assumptions of what is going to be inflation, how are we going to get rate of return, what are we going to spend. But all of these have variables that we have to, be a little bit prepared for variation in some of these considerations. But that can be done. You can get a fair sense of, all right, at what point do I have that expectation of financial freedom?
That's right. And that goes right into the next one. These two are, I guess, could have been put in the same category, but it talks about your retirement plan. And, we've talked a little bit about purpose, but I also interpret um, what's your retirement plan is to really, really do a deep dive about the conditions, the things that could happen in your retirement. Have you saved enough? That's your number. That's just like thinking about if I don't have a pension, or if I do, how much that cash flow that is, how much is my social security. I think people think about this and then they think about withdrawing from the assets that they've accumulated, and they just get this number as we're talking about. So I need $8,000 a month, for example, to live the lifestyle that I want. And they do the math and they say, okay, I can do that right now. So that's kind of, have I saved enough? But just continuing on that, I'd like to get your thoughts on what can mess up, right?
Yeah,
What
there's
can
variables. I
That's right.
mean, a couple of things. One is, okay, I can do that today, but what will I need in the future? How
So
will
important.
inflation factor into my cash flow demands over time? Am I spending principal, or am I only living off of earnings? And that, how am I defining earnings? How much, right? Markets don't only move in one direction when it
That's right.
comes to market volatility, as we talked about recently. Everyone's aware right now of all the volatility we're
Hmm.
enduring. So, those are things you need to be mindful of. There are other things like, well, am I going to buy a car from time to time? Where's that money going to come from? Am
That's
I going
right.
to travel? Are there going to be new additional expenses? Are we going to have occasionally do some renovations to the home, or update the bathroom or something? Whatever it might be, or the roof needs new shingles.
That
Fill in
is
the
an
blank, right?
those items that you've referenced is, I mean, they're simple to think about, but so many people do not include them when they're doing their cash flow projections. They're
And it can
saying,
really take a dent in some
right,
of the numbers. And as you know, one of the ones that can be most unexpected and damaging isn't any of these considerations, but the unexpected. I have family who needs something.
oh,
Um,
I have, yeah, someone who, maybe a child who, maybe you have children and you think they're all set, and then all of a sudden one of them has a job loss or a divorce, or the grandkids come along and you want to help there, or the list is really endless.
yeah,
Or maybe a
yeah,
daughter who wasn't going to get married gets married and you want to have a wedding, or The
or
list
a
is really,
divorce or whatever.
or a
Yes.
divorce, or
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Fill in the
name it.
blank,
Think
right?
about, and I like to remind clients when they think, oh, I'm 70 or whatever, nothing else is going to happen, everything's settled. Just, I say, think about your friends. What stories are your friends telling you? Or just think back 10 years. What has come up in your financial life that
Yeah.
you didn't
Envision.
foresee, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, gets them thinking. And so it's not just cash flow, like what are my expenses this month times 12 times 20 years or however long you expect to live.
Right.
It's really thinking about, and this is where when you work with us, I'll say that, or someone else who operates a business like you do, when we spend a lot of time getting to know our clients, understanding where they are, where they want to be in their personal situations and their challenges, and ask them these questions in person, because sometimes people are so focused on, I'm retiring, getting out of, retiring from something, I can't wait to be home, and I met my number. They don't
Yeah.
really dig into these what ifs, we call them. And then when you get to the big what if, I guess, is, what if I need some help at home? What if I need,
Yeah.
you know, what
Health,
if,
chronic illness or health deterioration
or
where
death of a
there's
spouse,
a cost,
right?
the death of a spouse where that can
Mhm.
change the cash flows. All of these are variables. You got to do some of these stress test kind of scenarios. What if I live longer than I expect? What if, right? You got to kind of look at some of these variables and say, how does that, is there enough cushion in the plan that I can make it work?
Right.
So it's not so tight. There are times when we'll run a plan and be like, we've got a plan that works. And then we say, well, what if you had to spend $1,000 a month more?
Right.
So not it's more, but it's not like outrageously more. But of course, it's not 1,000 a month; it's 1,000 a month now.
Right.
But then inflation
I
and
guess we should talk about that part too, right? Inflation.
yeah, and the impact can be not devastating always, but it can be like it just can totally change the outcome of the plan as to is this a viable plan or not. So in some instances it could be very narrow, in some instances it could be very large before it disrupts the plan. But my point is, these are things you need to be paying attention to, and then it can really be that much more important if you're in that scenario that you have to be, perpetually updating the plan to say, how's it going? How am I responding to
Right.
inflation is one example. And if the numbers are so tight, what would be the impact of another year of work or a part-time job or some of these other possibilities that might move the needle a little bit. In some cases, the best of circumstances, people have an abundance and there's more than sufficient resources. It's really a question of how does it affect the next generation, not so much
Right.
or their charitable intentions or something like that. It's not so much a hardship, but it's different in all different circumstances. So we need to think about these issues.
Yep. And just a plug for people who are not at retirement right now, but people maybe 5 years out or something. That's the time to go in and have your plan really crafted
That's
or
best.
revised, because small differences, working one more year or
Or
whatever
how
the
much
case.
you're saving at that point. A little more set aside could
That's
make a
right.
big impact because of
Right.
that could mean you're not drawing down more from certain places or
That's right.
when to turn on Social Security could make an impact. If I don't turn on Social Security when I retire, where am I going to draw from to spend money?
Yeah, that's
That can
one that
have an impact.
people often get wrong.
How much I have in tax diversification, like am I all in IRA type money
Right.
from all my money? Well, if that's the case, a third of that or whatever the number really is, but a chunk of that isn't yours. It's Uncle Sam's, so to
Right.
speak. So the thoughts of, I'm going to spend so much. Well, you may be spending that plus a
Right.
third, whatever.
Right. Yeah. So you're emotionally ready, you've saved enough, and you have a retirement plan in place that not only helps with your cash flow projections, but does some planning on longer term things,
Yeah.
stress tests it for the what ifs, all those, a solid, comprehensive financial plan in place that supports that you can, if you retire at 65, just to use that number, a lot of people are retiring earlier, but you have a likelihood, and it's not a small one, of living into your 90s. And
Yeah.
so, in
Yeah.
inflation, think about how much things cost 25 years ago and think about what they're going to cost 25 years from now. So, to have all these components accurately uh, included in your financial plan and testing it for the long term. The next one that they talk about is signs you might be ready for retirement. Are you okay with watching your money deplete? Because some people,
Mhm.
you go through, you start, say you get your first serious job when you're, in your mid 20s, started putting money away. You've been a diligent saver, investor. You're piling cash, as you say. You're a prudent investor, and you develop this nest egg that gives you the opportunity. I call it. It's not my quote. It's not my word, but
Yeah.
Bob Brinker's critical mass. You have the critical mass to live the retirement that you earned, and then people struggle with withdrawing money and watching those numbers go down.
Yeah. There's a certain, but I think, we people all come to their money issues with different experiences,
Hmm.
and particularly people who've been through scarcity um, are very much aware of the risks of asset depletion
Hmm.
and the anxiety that comes with that possibility. So, when we think about it, as we were just saying, sometimes you have money in different places. And so when you're talking about bank accounts or, some of these monies that might be depleting, may
Hmm.
not be all of the resources, but
Sure.
it may be um, the most impactful for that sense
Right.
of security. Um, so, in any case, this notion of if you're even if you're just talking about your net worth, not just the bank account per se, or
Right.
whatever it might be, that anxiety of seeing that get spent to some extent, I think it becomes really important to have clarity of what's my plan. You know, um, is the plan to have money left over for others?
Hmm.
That can be an important driver for many people.
Yep.
But for others, it's really about, well, I just don't want to run out over while I need it.
Hmm.
So does the does the balance going down on the net worth um, disrupt one's sense of comfort zone? Is
It's
it?
really normal to bother people. I mean, that's because you think about it, you spent your entire adult life building. It's not natural to think, even if you cognitively know it, right?
Yeah,
It's not natural to think that that number is going to go down
you're
because
gonna
you've been
switch
building.
directions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all this,
yeah,
like, snap your fingers and now you're going to be depleting your assets for the
yeah.
reasons that you saved them for.
Nicely done with that snap of the fingers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That was not a
Uh,
sound effect. That was real life.
yeah, that was good.
Yep.
Um, It's true. I think one of the things that oftentimes we see is not just that notion of the assets going down. It's people develop a comfort zone that they're willing to spend within, and they may have ample resources to spend more,
Hmm.
uh, but they don't have a comfort zone of spending more because they've become accustomed to a certain lifestyle
Right.
model that even though they might have the ability and the resources and the permission, as you talk about,
Hmm.
um, they just aren't comfortable with that at times because
Yep.
it's this anxiety that it will lead to scarcity.
Yeah. I just have one follow-up on scarcity. It's just a note for people. Some people have not lived scarcity, had scarcity in their lives in their adult life,
Yeah.
but they could have experienced it as a child, and that can have equally
It's formative. Yeah.
or even greater impact on how you look at these things. So
Yeah.
having somebody to talk it out and having that, not to be super repetitive, but having that financial plan in place and going back to it, like we get clients in at least once a year, sometimes more if they need it. But at least once a year, we want them to sit down or virtually meet with us and say, all right, let's look at your plan. How are you doing? Projecting it out. How's the projections look? Anything new, of course. And that should add, I think it does, from my experience with clients, increases that ability that they have to say, okay, my plan's here. I'm allowed to do this, allowed permission.
Yeah.
Um, I have this travel to Europe in my budget every 5 years, and it's the fifth year, so I can go. It's not gonna mean I'm gonna go
Yeah,
broke.
you know what it is though, Jeff? I mean, I think we're trying to provide people intellectual
Yeah,
rationale,
that's true.
and a lot of this stuff is what hits you on an emotional level.
Right.
That is, it's not necessarily a rational decision as much as an unspoken
Feeling. Yeah.
comfort or discomfort that people have, and so sometimes the that rational, oh, here's the evidence,
Hmm.
can overcome that, but at other times it's just, this is where I'm comfortable and that's where I'm
Yeah.
going to stay, that kind of mindset. But ultimately, these are things you need to, I think what we really want is to make sure that people are tuned in if there's a risk of depleting assets,
Right.
that they are prepared for how to navigate that, and not to have it happen too quickly as it relates to their lifespan. That it may be part of the plan that you're going to spend through some of your resources by design, and that's okay. That's, some people want that, some people don't. So it's really a
Right.
matter of what you're trying to do, but you have to be, I think, vigilant around making sure that it's not perpetuating decline too quickly.
Right.
That kind
It's
of.
like I have the vision when I'm talking about this is you're driving a large ship across the ocean to a destination, retirement, and the end of your retirement. And if you get off course and you know about it, you can make a
Yeah,
small correction.
right.
You know,
Enough time in advance, you get an
right.
easy time. You
But
wait
if
too long, yeah,
you're gonna hit the shore, or you're gonna miss your mark, or
or it's going to take a lot more to try to get that course correction, can be
that's right.
more difficult to do. So yeah, I think these are, and so ultimately what these are metaphors we're talking about, but
Hmm.
what does that mean? It means you need to review your plan, with some frequency,
Yep.
because it's not static. And you
Right.
need to say, oh, well, in this case, we've had a couple of years of great markets. Oh, how does that change the plan? Oh, we've had bad markets. How does
Right.
that change the plan? Or does it in both of these instances?
Yeah. Probably
Um,
not as much as people think.
right, right. And so, or hey, we had some unexpected expenses.
Right.
We didn't have some of the things we planned to do that we
Yeah.
we, we didn't do, um, etc. And this gives you some sense of, oh, you can reassess, what do we want to do now,
Yep.
and or maybe what do we have to do now,
Yep. And there's things that you may not have thought about that we, talk to clients about all the time, that they think they either got to cut their spending drastically or they have to, get a job, right? And there's things that we talk about with clients, that downsizing your house, for example,
Yeah,
or
a lot of this comes back to
relocating.
accuracy of the information, the
Right.
data, which
Right.
is a challenge. But we had this very conversation, to your point, Jeff, with clients very recently, where they retired and their numbers at the outset looked good, but in review didn't look so good. And well, how could this happen? Well, you're spending a lot more than you said you were going to spend. Oh,
Right.
all right, let's evaluate. Is this an ongoing thing or are these
Yeah,
one-offs?
is it temporary, right?
Yeah. So we can evaluate that, and if we know that it's not a perpetual thing, okay, where's how's that adjust the
Right.
plan? How do we adapt? If not, then we got to take more significant action. What are we going to do to course correct?
Right. Right. So we've been talking a lot about, we started with behavioral, and then we, went into the number and your plan and watching your money go down. Now we're going to go back to, I don't know if it's behavioral or not, but it's
I
certainly
think so.
emotional.
I think that's behavioral. Yeah.
Behavioral, emotional is, have you talked to your spouse? And, are you ready for retirement? Have you talked to your spouse? Are you guys on the same page about what that means? Both of you retiring at the same time? If not, is that okay? And what do you want to do in retirement? How many times have we heard, Chris? Usually the scenario is one of the we'll say the wife had a professional career where she was traveling a lot, and the husband maybe worked in a certain geographical area all the time, maybe went to the same office building or the same factory or the same location. And so the wife wants to retire and go nowhere. She wants to nest. She wants to be at home and be involved in the community and
After having dealt with all that stuff.
all
Yeah.
that business travel. And the husband, who hasn't really seen much of the world, he's been, sedentary in that one kind of spot or one geographical area. He has this dream of traveling the country. And things like, I'm using the extreme example, of course, but have you talked to your spouse? Are you guys on the same page? Do you have the same mindset about what retirement looks like? I want to move to Florida. I don't want to move to Florida. All these different things that come up. Get on the same page and spend the time as you're thinking about all these other things, financial things perhaps. Talk about the lifestyle, not just on what you want, but with your significant other, a spouse or family, however you would define it.
Yeah, I totally get your point. I think it's a partnership. You've got to both be on a similar page, or how are we going to adapt?
Mhm.
I have to say, I mean, there are couples I know where it's very much that notion that one does and one does not like to travel, and
Right.
so they find a workaround. Oh, I'm going to travel with my sister, or whatever it might be. That
Yeah, half the time I'll go
I'll
with
go with
friends or
I'll go
whatever,
with a
right?
friend or a kid or some
Hmm.
thing where they get the opportunity to do what they want to do. But it's just, and everyone's placated in a sense. Everyone gets to do what their comfort zone is. There's more than one way to do things. You
Yep.
know what I mean? So if one wants to and one doesn't, you can find a way to make that work.
Hmm.
If it's otherwise, it's like, well, I'd be interested in going here, and okay, we'll do that trip together. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's not a right or wrong. There's no value judgments in any of this. It's just things to reflect on and think about and deal with before you make this decision to retire. Make sure that these items, and everybody has unique things, but that
I think
these
the
items
biggest,
be considered.
I think the biggest challenge when it comes to spouses and this communication between spouses is when you have very different experiences, behaviors,
Hmm.
that abundance and scarcity kind of
Sure.
mindset. When you're not on the same page, it can be very frustrating and challenging for each other
Yeah.
to navigate that. In one instance, someone's a planner and a saver, and
Hmm.
trying to avoid that scarcity concern.
Hmm.
And somebody else is saying, "Oh, we got abundance, we got plenty. Let's go." They're a shopper or whatever it might
Right.
be.
Whatever it is
And
for them.
you can get into this scenario where it's like you're kind of bumping heads a little bit, and it can create tensions and frustration. So there has to be good communication around these issues. And a lot of times, what you find is when there's not more of a shared objective, it's very difficult to communicate around these issues.
Right.
And it's really defining as to how things will play out over time we don't have the skills as a marriage counselor or, or whatever it is,
Sometimes
but
it turns out to be that.
at the same time, it does, you do have these issues where you have very different preferences and issues going on where we have to sometimes help people navigate a little bit of how are we going to find some consensus on what we're going to do. And, but that's part of the virtue, I think, of planning is there's an opportunity to air some of these things in a way that's healthy and deliberative as opposed to, just coasting along and not necessarily addressing some of these things and finding that it can be frustrating at times.
Exactly. Have a good process usually has a good outcome. That's the way I usually think about it. You have a good process in decision making, your decision is likely going to be the correct one for you and your family.
Well, good article. Definitely check it out. And Jeff, once again, we are a little longer than we intended for our conversation, but listen, our listeners, if you are in need of a little bit of help in thinking about your retirement readiness, better to prepare, have the conversation, do some of these steps. If you need help in the process, if you're not doing it on your own, best case is you do a little bit on your own, but get a little bit of help along the way, and you will have a good outcome. If we can be a resource to you in that process, don't hesitate to reach out to us here. You can find us. The easiest way is go to our webpage. That can be found by the name of the show, Something More with Chris Boyd. And you can always give us a call or send us an email. With that in mind, until next time, everybody, keep striving for something more.
Thank you for listening to Something More with Chris Boyd. Call us for help, whether it's for financial planning or portfolio management, insurance concerns, or those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Whatever's on your mind, visit us at somethingmorewithchrisboyd.com or call us toll free at 866-771-8901. Or send us your questions to amr-info@wealthenhancement.com. You're listening to Something More with Chris Boyd Financial Talk Show. Wealth Enhancement Advisory Services and J. Christopher Boyd provide investment advice on an individual basis to clients only. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. The information given on this program is general financial comments and cannot be relied upon as pertaining to your specific situation. Wealth Enhancement Group cannot guarantee that using the information from this show will generate profits or ensure freedom from loss. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.